I wanted to take apart what is meant by healing. I wanted to move towards being able to have healing services in this church. But before we do that, I wanted to be made sure that I knew what healing meant. And that if I had an idea of what healing meant, then I was able to preach on it.
Come on.
Don't come up for healing just for healing of the body. Healing of the body can be very important. It can be a powerful symbol of our inner transformation. But ultimately, we as a church are not going to get anywhere at all in anything, in depths of spirituality, in growth in numbers, in the outreach we have to anybody, unless the people who come to the church start to prepare themselves for a transformation which is extremely hard bought. For a healing which brings wholeness, not comfort.
Come on.
The things which we go for healing are usually because they cause us discomfort. My leg hurts, my head hurts. I feel sick, therefore I go to the doctor. I search for the physician because I want it to be taken away. Well, we are looking for something completely different. We are looking for a transformation to wholeness that is so profound that, like St. Paul, we can still have a thorn in our flesh and we realize that we are made whole. Like the desert father, Abba John the Dwarf, he was called, Abba John the Dwarf, who was very misshapen in his body. He became one of the most extraordinary spiritual figures of his time. And yet I am certain that his prayers were not that he be made straight and tall. His prayers were all that he may be made whole. And I am also sure that he went to his God in a state of wholeness, having been healed while still under 4 foot tall with a hunchback. I'm sometimes very, very suspicious about televangelists. Not because they all speak rubbish, they don't all speak rubbish, but because some of the stresses that they put upon people all seem to be about our physical comfort. If they're not about taking away things that irritate us, they are about taking away poverty because it irritates us, and giving us huge amounts of money because God always wants that for us, doesn't he? No. If you point towards those people who most model wholeness, who most model health, the one thing they do not all have in common are Rolls Royces sitting in the drive. With apologies to Greg Lowe, who does have several Rolls Royces sitting in his driveway. Humility is essential for healing. For to be healed, you have to accept the gift of an arm. If you wish to be healed, you have to accept in our earthly world that the doctor knows better than you do. If you wish to be healed in our earthly world, you have to accept the gift of the doctor's knowledge and the gift of the medicine from the pharmacy. If you wish to be healed in the wider sense of things, if you wish to be healed of all that ails you, if you wish to be healed before the throne of God, then you have to accept that God has something to give you that you don't have at the moment.
That's right, mate. Yes, sir.
You have to accept that you need God's presence in your life. You have to accept that you need that transformation. If you are comfortable, as you are, if Christianity is at the moment a therapy, well, that's all well and good. But that's not the full measure of Christianity. Christianity is as big as you will allow it to be, as extraordinary as you will allow it to be, and as transformative as you will allow it to be. Because if you want to be transformed into something truly stupendous, then you have to accept that the process is going to be massive in its impact upon your life. I don't normally preach in quite this style, but I've thought about this over the years, when I was in the Church of England, and when I was in the wilderness, and when I came back to be an MCC pastor. And I honestly believe that by telling you anything else, by telling you anything other than the level of commitment needed in your spiritual life, then I will be deceiving you and I will be lying to you. By telling you that you can receive the true blessings of a relationship by God just by popping into church every few weeks, or every week, I'm lying to you. And you will eventually become disappointed and angry and upset because you will not receive those blessings that God has to give you. Ultimately, it has to be that effort of will, which is encapsulated in the Christian world in the moment of baptism. Baptism is that outward sign of the inward grace, whereby human beings offer themselves up to God and say, from henceforth, it is to you that I return again and again and again, not to anything else. During my life there have been numerous things which have distracted me and occasionally made me happy. And before I came to that point of transition, I would return again and again and again to them when I wanted solace and comfort. The difference was, after my baptism, it wasn't that I spent all my time in quiet contemplation and prayer. I drifted off just as much as ever. The difference is that the point at which I came back to again and again and again, and the point at which I knew all my blessings and my joy and my future happiness flowed from, was God. It had changed fundamentally in my appreciation. Now, so far, for the 25th, we have one candidate for baptism.
Amen. Yes.
Which is good enough, that's wonderful, that's glorious. That is fabulous. And that candidate for baptism will be dressed all in white, because that's traditional, and they will be dunked fully under the water, and the water will symbolize death. The water will symbolize death. They will withdraw from the light and from the sunlight and from air and from all those things which sustain our physical body, and they will enter the realm of water where, if they weren't pulled up again, they would die. It is an acceptance, a giving of yourself in total trust to the hands of another. Symbolically, myself as pastor, but in reality, the hands of God. The life which we depend upon, in every respect, is barren and bankrupt without God sustaining us. And that's what the moment of baptism does. In a more powerful way than anything else, it says, I wish to be healed. When I was a child, I read The Water Babies, a children's story, very popular in England. Anyone read The Water Babies here? Absolutely beautiful story. And in that, there's a small child who's a chimney sweep, and covered in soot continually because he's forced to go up the chimneys at the age of about 7 years old. And he catches a glimpse in the far distance of a river twinkling in the sunlight between two hills. And this chant starts up, I wish to be clean, I wish to be clean, I wish to be clean. Until eventually he hears the birds singing it outside. And when the wind is blowing in the grate of the chimney, he hears it singing, I wish to be clean, I wish to be clean. And when he first glimpsed that river, that was enough that it started to take over his entire life until he had to be in the water, until he had to go down into the river, until he had to be clean. Because once he glimpsed it, he could never forget he'd seen it. Once he glimpsed it, he could never forget he'd seen it. Once we have glimpsed God, in whichever way we have glimpsed God, we will never forget that we have seen it. And it will dominate our lives whether we like it or not. And if we choose to turn our backs on that, then life will be one of frustration, increasing frustration, as all those things which we did previously, which comforted us and sustained us, become less and less valuable to us. But life in God is sustained and glorified by that same God. Humility and healing. Naaman, who was the Persian general, was too grand to bathe 3 times in the River Jordan. When he sent his servants to ask Elisha for the cure for Naaman's leprosy, Elisha said, tell him to bathe 3 times in the River Jordan. He wasn't happy with that because he was a very important man, and he expected something spectacular. But what was required was his humility, that just like everyone else, into the river, and it's not a river like the Mississippi, trust me, the River Jordan is a very small river indeed. It's narrow, it's probably only as wide as this room from here to those doors. It's shallow, and most of the time it's extraordinarily muddy, and yet people still, back in the day,